Natalia was leaving the notary's office, holding a folder of documents tightly against her chest. 6 months of waiting had come to an end. Her grandmother, Elena Nikolaevna, had left her granddaughter a solid amount of money in her will, an amount that could radically change the family's life. The autumn wind ruffled her hair, yellow leaves rustled under her feet. Natalia walked toward the bus stop, mentally going over her plans. They could finally renovate the apartment, buy her daughter Lisa new furniture for her room, save for education, and maybe even take the whole family on vacation. They hadn't been anywhere farther than the dacha in a long time. At home, Natalia was met by Sergei. Her husband stood in the hallway, leaning his shoulder against the doorframe, and carefully studied his wife. His expression was tense, even stern. "Well, did you finish everything?" Sergei asked without even greeting her. "Yes," Natalia nodded, taking off her coat. "All the documents are ready. The money will be deposited into the account within a week." Sergei nodded and suddenly straightened sharply. "That's it. You'll transfer the money to my mother. Don't you dare argue or it's divorce," he threw out. Natalia froze with her coat in her hands, frowned, and tilted her head, looking intently at Sergei as if checking whether her husband was in his right mind. The woman certainly had not expected such a turn of events. "Repeat that, please," Natalia said slowly. "It seemed to me that you said something strange." "You heard perfectly well," Sergei cut her off. "Valentina Ivanovna needs the money more than us. She is elderly, her health is failing, medicines are expensive, and Irichka still doesn't have a permanent job. She's scraping by with odd jobs." Natalia slowly hung her coat on the hanger, never taking her eyes off her husband. "And therefore I must give the inheritance from my grandmother to your mother?" Natalia clarified. "Seriously?" "That would be fair," Sergei said firmly. "We're young, we can still earn more, but Mom's time is running out. And besides, family should help family." Blood rushed to Natalia's face. The woman straightened up and looked her husband straight in the eyes. "Divorce, then," Natalia said calmly. Sergei froze, blinking. Apparently, he had expected tears, excuses, attempts to negotiate, but certainly not such a reaction. "What are you doing?" Sergei asked in confusion. "I didn't mean it out of malice. I just want everyone to be satisfied." "Everyone?" Natalia repeated. "And I, it turns out, am not included in this everyone." "Well, you understand," Sergei began, but Natalia cut him off with a gesture. I understand very well," the woman said, and walked into the room. Sergei remained standing in the hallway, clearly not understanding what had just happened. He expected resistance, but not such a decisive rebuff. Natalia sat down at the writing desk and turned on the computer. The decision matured instantly and finally. The inheritance was a resource that her grandmother, Elena Nikolaevna, had bequeathed to her granddaughter alone. Not to Sergei, not to his mother, not to his sister, to Natalia, and she alone would manage that money. While Sergei wandered around the apartment muttering under his breath, Natalia entered her bank's online cabinet. She opened a new savings account in her daughter Lisa's name. The girl would turn 18 in 3 years, and that money would be very useful for university admission. The next day, as soon as the inheritance was credited to her main account, Natalia immediately transferred half the sum to her daughter's account. She printed out all the documents and receipts of the operation and locked them in the safe. She left the other half in her own account. That money would be needed for current needs and possibly to pay a lawyer. Sergei found out about the transfer in the evening when he looked into Natalia's bank app on her phone. What have you done? Where's the money? In a safe place, Natalia replied briefly, not looking up from her book. I told you to transfer everything to Mom. Return it immediately. Natalia lifted her head and calmly looked at her furious husband. The funds are in our daughter's account. That's the best investment I could think of. Lisa's still a child. She's 15 years old. Sergei waved his arms. She doesn't understand the value of money. But I understand it perfectly well, Natalia answered dryly. And I understand even better the value of honesty in a family. Sergei tried to insist, to threaten, to persuade, but Natalia was inflexible. The money would stay where it was. Period. The next morning, while her husband was at work, Natalia went to see a lawyer. She needed to sort out the intricacies of family law and understand what Sergei could claim in case of divorce. The lawyer, a young woman named Victoria, listened to her story attentively. An inheritance received during marriage is not considered joint property, Victoria explained. Your husband cannot claim these funds. You did absolutely the right thing by transferring the money to your daughter. And if he still files for divorce, Natalia asked, whose name is the apartment under? Mine. I inherited it from my parents even before marriage. Then your husband can't get anything there either. The only thing subject to division is jointly acquired property. Furniture, appliances, a car if there is one. Natalia nodded. They didn't have a car, and the furniture and appliances weren't valuable enough to go to court over. My advice, collect all documents proving the origin of your funds, certificates of inheritance, account statements, and record your husband's threats if he repeats them. Returning home, Natalia discovered that Sergei had brought reinforcements. In the kitchen sat Valentina Ivanovna, her mother-in-law, drinking coffee. Next to her sat Irina, Sergei's sister. Well, it's wonderful you came, Valentina Ivanovna said without even greeting her. We need to have a serious talk. Natalia entered the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. I'm listening, the woman said curtly. Sergei told us about the inheritance, the mother-in-law began. Of course, we're happy for you, but you must understand, family is not just you and Lisa. There's also us. There's Irina. It would be right to share. Irina interrupted. I've been looking for a job for 6 months and can't find anything, and then such a sum appears. Natalia placed the glass on the table and looked at the women intently. Tell me, Valentina Ivanovna, when your mother passed away and left you an apartment, did you share it with anyone? The mother-in-law was confused. That was different. It was my grandmother, Elena Nikolaevna, and she wrote the will in my name, not in Sergei's name, not yours, mine. But we're family, Adlina exclaimed. Family. Only it's a strange kind of family. When money is needed, we are family, but when I asked for help repairing Lisa's room, everyone was very busy. Valentina Ivanovna flushed. We helped as best we could. As you could or as you wanted, Natalia clarified. Because I remember very well when I asked Sergei to help move a wardrobe, he said his back hurt. And 2 days later, he gladly helped you, Valentina Ivanovna, move dacha furniture. An awkward silence fell. In any case, the money has already been transferred to my daughter, Natalia said firmly, and it cannot be returned. So, the conversation is over. Sergei, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up sharply. Fine, then pack your things and get out of my house. Natalia smirked. Your house? Sergei, maybe you forgot, but the apartment is in my name. So you'll be the one leaving. Her husband froze, apparently only now realizing the whole situation. You're throwing me out? I'm protecting my own interests and the interests of my daughter. And you can go to your mother. Valentina Ivanovna is so concerned about family values, let her take her son in. That evening, Natalia sat in the kitchen with her daughter and explained the situation. Mom, what will happen to Dad? Lisa asked. I don't know, honey. That was his choice to put his mother's interests above those of his own family. And yes, I really did transfer part of the money to you. Half for your education, the other half we'll use to renovate your room and maybe take a vacation during the holidays. Lisa nodded. You know, Mom, I don't mind. I never liked how Grandma Valentina spoke to you, as if you owed her something. Natalia hugged her daughter. The girl turned out to be wiser than many adults in this situation. Late in the evening, Sergei finally returned home. He went into the bedroom, took out a bag, and began packing his things. Are you seriously going to destroy the family because of money? Her husband asked. Natalia stood in the doorway watching him pack. You destroyed the family when you decided you could order me around, the woman replied. I'm not forcing you to do anything. If you want to stay, stay, but stop trying to pressure me. Mom won't interfere anymore, Sergei promised. I'll talk to her. Sergei, it's not just about your mother, Natalia said tiredly. The fact is, you didn't even consult me. You just gave me an ultimatum, and that means you don't see me as your equal. Her husband froze with the shirt in his hands. That's not true. It is true, and until you understand that, we have nothing to talk about. Sergei finished packing and headed for the door. At the door, he turned. I'll come back, and we'll discuss everything calmly. Maybe, Natalia nodded, but only when you learn how to talk, not command. The door closed behind her husband. Natalia went into her daughter's room. Lisa was already asleep. Tomorrow it would be necessary to think about further plans, but the main thing was that the money was safe and no one could take it away. A week passed peacefully. Sergei occasionally called, trying to arrange a meeting, but Natalia was adamant. First an apology for the ultimatum, then conversations. Her husband had no intention of apologizing, considering himself right. On Friday evening, the doorbell rang persistently. Natalia looked through the peephole and saw Sergei with Valentina Ivanovna. The mother-in-law held some kind of folder in her hands and looked extremely determined. Open the door, Natalia, Sergei said loudly. We need to have a serious talk. Natalia opened the door but didn't let the relatives inside. What's this about? The woman asked coldly. We demand explanations. Valentina Ivanovna pushed the folder forward. We need all the documents about where you put the inheritance. Documents? Natalia repeated. Please. The woman went into the room, took out the bank statements out of the safe, and returned to the hallway. She placed the papers on the shoe cabinet. The money is allocated. This is my lawful share of the inheritance, Natalia said calmly. Valentina Ivanovna grabbed the documents and began feverishly examining them. Her face grew redder with every second. You stole from the family? The mother-in-law screamed. How could you transfer such a sum to a child? Lisa still understands nothing about life. Natalia straightened up and looked at her mother-in-law with cold calm. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I simply managed what was legally left to me, Natalia pronounced clearly. Elena Nikolaevna was my grandmother, not yours. But we were counting on. Counting on what? Natalia interrupted. On me blindly following your orders? Sergei, you gave me an ultimatum. Either the money goes to your mother or divorce, remember? I just wanted to help the family. What family? Natalia sneered. Valentina Ivanovna, tell me honestly, when was the last time you asked about Liza's life? When did you ask how she studies, what she likes? The mother-in-law faltered. I always asked. Lies. Natalia cut her off. You only care about your granddaughter when you need something from me. The rest of the time, Liza doesn't exist for you. Sergei tried to take control. Fine then. Since you're so stubborn, then we'll get divorced, her husband declared. We'll see how you sing when you're left without support. Natalia nodded. Good. Then we'll see each other in court. Her husband froze. Apparently, Sergei had expected tears, persuasion, attempts to reconcile, but Natalia was absolutely calm. Are you serious? Sergei asked uncertainly. Absolutely, Natalia confirmed and hung up. Meanwhile, Valentina Ivanovna turned to a lawyer she knew, hoping to find a way to challenge Natalia's operations with the inheritance. But the lawyer destroyed all her hopes. Valentina Ivanovna, an inheritance received during marriage is not subject to division. It is Natalia's personal property, and transferring the money to her minor daughter is absolutely legal. But what about the apartment? Valentina Ivanovna asked. My son is registered there. The apartment was Natalia's before marriage. Registration does not give ownership rights. At most, your son can get small compensation for furniture and appliances. The mother-in-law returned devastated. Her hopes for easy profit had finally collapsed. Sergei also realized the apartment where the family had lived for 15 years would not go to him, nor would the inheritance. Mom, what do we do? Sergei asked Valentina Ivanovna. Try to make peace, the mother-in-law sighed. There's no other way. But it was too late. Natalia had already made her final decision and was not going to back down. The court hearing went quickly. Natalia provided all the documents, the certificate of ownership of the apartment, inheritance papers, and account statements about the transfer of money to her daughter.